but thank you for joining us today. My name is Ryan Irving, and I am the lead strategist here at RyWeb. I am Google Analytics certified. I use it extensively, mostly to advise our clients on how they can get better results from their website, but also from their wider digital marketing. This morning, I'm going to cover some simple elements that will enable each of you to maximize Google Analytics for your businesses. And specifically, I will be looking at the best setup. Sorry, we just got one more person joining us. We'll be looking at the best setup, the most important metrics, how to analyze these results as well. And as Heather said, we will have a little bit of time at the end for any questions, so feel free to whack those in the chat as we go along. So just before we get started, I do have a quick disclaimer, and that is because I don't know each of you, I don't know your businesses, so it's obviously impossible for me to provide any personalized advice, but I can guarantee that almost everything I'll be talking about this morning will apply to 99% of businesses. So I'm sure you're going to get plenty of value. It's also important to stipulate that whenever I say Google Analytics, I am referring to Google Analytics 4. The older Universal Analytics will stop processing data at the beginning of July. So hopefully you've all migrated over to GA4 by now. If you haven't, that absolutely must be the first thing you do after this webinar, because as I said, it will stop collecting data very, very soon. So make sure you get that done. All right, let's get into it. So in terms of setup, the reason I've got a slide on setup is because I actually recommend a combination of 3 Google platforms, not just analytics on its own. When it comes to the installation of analytics on your website, I recommend you use Google Tag Manager. If you haven't used it before, Tag Manager enables you to consolidate any third-party apps, any of those scripts. When you get asked to add those into your website, Tag Manager will consolidate all of those into one. So you can simply install the Tag Manager script into your website. Sorry, one sec. And then you can add as many of those third-party data collecting platforms into Tag Manager without having to bulk out your website with loads of scripts that will simply slow it down. So for example, you're obviously going to have the Google Analytics tag within Tag Manager, but you could also add the LinkedIn Insight tag. You could add HubSpot, Hotjar, or Facebook. There are hundreds of other platforms that you could be linking into Tag Manager. And as I said, you don't have to load all of those into your website. But even if you don't intend on adding any third-party platforms, you should still use Tag Manager simply for your analytics installation. And that is because it enables you to much more easily create new events and test them. I'll come back to events a little bit later on. But fundamentally, it's important that you know that creating them is far easier in Tag Manager than it is in Analytics. All right, so once you've installed Tag Manager into your website and you've added Google Analytics into Tag Manager, it will start collecting data. Now, this will enable you to analyze data from this point onwards. But I recommend a couple of tweaks to the way that the data is collected first. So one of the most important things that you're going to need to do is toggle which of the events that you want to track as conversions. And again, events, conversions, I will cover this in a little bit more detail a little bit later on. But for now, it's just important that you know that you need to turn the right conversions on within Google Analytics. We also want to filter visits by you or your team or your colleagues, etc., from the data, because otherwise this can skew some of the data depending on how much traffic you get. So it's important that we filter this out. You can do this, the easiest way to do this, or the most effective way to do this, is by getting your IP address of your machine or the machines that you use in your office, and then adding them as a filter within the define internal traffic setting within Google Analytics 4. Now, if you don't know what your IP address is, you can simply Google what is my IP address and it will tell you. However, it's important that you know if you have a static IP address or not. And again, I don't want to get too technical with it. Fundamentally, if you have a business, internet broadband line, it's likely you'll have a static IP address. But if you work from home, you probably don't, or in a shared working space, you probably don't. In that situation, I recommend you use a browser extension instead, which is creatively called Block Yourself from Analytics. It's really easy. Install the browser extension and just pop the URL of your website in there, and then your data will not be, you will not see your data in those reports. The good thing about that way is you can easily get other people to do it as well. Okay, you could just stop there. You could just use Tag Manager and then send the data, collect the data and send the data into Analytics, and then use Analytics to analyze the data. But the Google Analytics platform itself, I personally find, is quite clunky. And I prefer the freedom to only see the data that I actually need, and quickly as well. So for the data analyst itself, I recommend Looker Studio. Looker Studio used to be called Google Data Studio. It's still owned by Google. It's basically the same thing. They've just changed names recently. But it's really, really effective for creating only the reports and data you want to see. You can also blend or mix data sources within Looker Studio too. So obviously you're going to have Google Analytics as a data source, but you could also have data from other sources like Google Search Console, which would enable you to see more SEO data, or Google Ads, which would allow you to see more data around your PPC campaigns, etc. There are hundreds of data connections you can add. There are social media data sources, etc. So it's really effective if you're a marketing manager, or if you have a number of marketing tactics and strategies on the go, you can mix all of that data into one report. Primarily though, again, this morning we're talking about Google Analytics, and Looker Studio allows you to create reports that are completely bespoke to just your needs. They're much easier to read because they're much more visual, and that makes sharing the data or the results with your wider team much easier than asking them to look at screenshots of Google Analytics, and you'll just get questions like, what is engagement rate or bounce rate, and what does that mean? You can simply show them the data that will make sense to them. Now, at this point, if you're sat there and you're worrying about, how to technically install these platforms, connect them up, if you're worried about that, please don't. I assure you, it is so easy. Unfortunately, covering doing so, I don't have time to do that in this webinar, but I promise you, if you do get stuck, a quick Google search and you'll be well on your way. Okay, so once you've got the three platforms connected and data is being collected, now let's look at the metrics that I recommend you focus on. So for most businesses, I believe there should be just one number that everyone should focus on. And that is, quite simply, how much money is your marketing activity generating for your business? Marketing is a revenue generating activity, whether it be your website, which is a marketing tool, or the activity on LinkedIn or Facebook, etc. These things should ultimately lead to leads or sales or new clients, which will then turn into revenue for the business. So once you know the number, once you know how much money your marketing activity is generating for your business, not only can you share that with other people because they will understand it, but you can also analyze why you're getting that number and what you can do to fundamentally increase it. So right now you're looking at a screenshot that I took. This is an actual screenshot from one of our clients' Looker Studio reports. I took it yesterday, and you can see just how simple it is. It looks nothing like Google Analytics. And this screen in particular is focused purely on the value generated by the website. And that is just a simple sum of the other contributing numbers. So I'll explain. So top left, we have users. Most people will know what that means, but fundamentally is how many people visited the website. I will, it's important to note that it's not actual people. Google Analytics, it's impossible for analytics to know that I, Ryan Irving, own this laptop and this mobile phone. And therefore, if I go on your website on my mobile and then shut it down and then go on my laptop later on, Google will think that's 2 users because it doesn't know that both of them were me. But users is as close as possible we can get to individual people. Second is conversions. So this is what I touched on earlier. These are the events that we have created, we have labeled as conversions. And again, I'll show you a little bit more about that in a sec. But they should just simply be the events or actions taken on our website that could lead to revenue. The most obvious examples of this are somebody completes a sales inquiry form, somebody clicks on a telephone number or an email address, etc. So these things are likely to be prospects who are interested in your services. So if we divide conversions by users, you then get the website conversion rate. And this metric is important because it is the simplest way of measuring how effective your website is at generating revenue. And it, to some extent, doesn't matter what the number is, you now have a number to work with. If it's 1%, can you get it to 2%? And so on and so forth. In order to convert this into a financial value, though, we need some business metrics. So these have been manually added into the Looker Studio report. They haven't come from Google Analytics. And this, again, is another benefit to using Looker Studio for analyzing your data, is you can blend data sources, as I said earlier, including manual data, like the sales conversion rate. All this is how often you are likely to convert an inquiry into a client. For example, if 10 prospective clients called, how many of those would you expect you, your sales team, your sales manager, whoever it is, how many of those would you expect to turn into paying clients? If the phone rang 10 times, you turn that into 4 clients, your sales conversion rate is 40%. Nice and easy. Next is average client value. So on average, how much is a client or a customer worth to your business? This should be calculated on the average lifespan of a client. So the easiest way to work this out is take your revenue for a year and divide it by the number of clients you have. The simple maths, let's say you've got 100 clients and in a year you made 100 grand, 100,000 divided by 100, that's £1,000 per client on average per year. Then you simply multiply that by the number of years that you expect a client to stay with you. Now, you probably won't have hard data for that. You might do, which is great. But if you don't, then you can just take more of a gut feeling. You might say, well, I think clients typically stay with our business for 10 years. So then we take the £1,000 earlier as our average client spend per year, multiply it by 10. Our average client value therefore equals 10 grand. So as you can see, for this particular client, their sales conversion rate is 28%. They obviously know that number. They track that number internally, which is why it's so accurate. And they believe a client is worth on average 5 grand to them. So the value generated then is simply a multiplication of these numbers. It is the number of conversions, 80, multiplied by the sales conversion rate as a percentage of the average client value equals £112,000 for this period of time for this client. Okay. The simplicity of this screen means that you could share it with anyone within the business, and they would much more easily understand the value of the performance of the website, of you, of your marketing team. Any efforts that have gone into marketing or generating revenue can easily be understood. And once you have a report set up like this, you can then break these metrics break them down by any number of ways, including source of traffic. So this is a screenshot from the same client's Looker Studio report. which shows exactly where that £112,000 originated from. It's the same period of time, it's the same report. So as you can see, this particular client has 4 sources of traffic: organic search or SEO, none or direct. I'll talk a little bit more about none and direct a little bit later on because it's a little bit of a mysterious one. CPC or cost per click, or in this case, I know they're running Google Ads, and referral traffic. So any visits to their website from another website. That's their 4 sources of traffic. Not only can you see how many users each of those sources generated, but most importantly, you can see how much financial pound value was generated by all 4 sources of those traffic. So if you're investing money in SEO, you can see your return. If you're investing your money on Google Ads, you can see the return. At first glance, you might look at this and say, okay, organic search generated the most money, 56 grand. That's half of the total. That is a lot. Let's focus more energy into SEO. Let's try and get more people to our site from SEO because it's generating the most money. But actually, by looking at the conversion rate of each of these sources, you can see that actually people that found their website via either Google Ads or by clicking a link from a referring website converted at a much higher rate. So having been through this exercise not so long ago with this client, we then had a bit of a deeper dive into the referral traffic. And that data revealed that those conversions came from just one website. And our client didn't know this before that. Now, I've hidden the URLs of these websites just on the off chance it could lead to my client's identity. I doubt it would, but I'm just going to be careful. But you can see that this particular website, the one at the top, it sent 23 users to my client's website, which generated 6 conversions. That is a whopping 26% conversion rate. That is massive. And not only that, but that traffic, we can see that traffic is worth over £8,000 to my client. So armed with this information, our client is now in discussions with that particular website to see how they could potentially get more traffic to my client's website, because my client knows that this is worth it. But what's more is that if the owner of that business or whoever they end up speaking to requests any form of payment, my client can see exactly how much any additional traffic might be worth to them. Divide £8,400 by 23, and a user is worth £365. So if you didn't have this data and this web company approached my client and said, hey, would you like 23 people on your website, but you have to give us £500, most people would probably laugh at that. So I'm not going to pay you £500 for 20 people to come to my website. But if someone said to you, pay me £500 and I'll give you £8,400 return value, you'd probably take them up on it. We're only scratching the surface here, but hopefully you can see why it's so important to assign financial value to this data and why these metrics in particular are so important. We're not looking at bounce rate, engagement rate, average number of pages, all that kind of stuff. Now, that's not because they're not useful. It's just because we need to start at the top. Just by looking at this data, my client isn't wasting time with how to optimize meta tags and things like that. They've gone straight to the owner of that website to see if they can get some more traffic. And that is going to be such a quick and easy return. In order for you to see similar data in your reports, we need to go back a couple of steps. So earlier, I mentioned that you can easily create events within Google Tag Manager. And this is what you need to do in order to track how often someone takes a particular action on your website. I think I said earlier, for the majority of businesses, this is likely to include when somebody clicks on a telephone number, somebody clicks on an email address, or somebody completes or submits an inquiry. Depending on your business, though, you may need to get a little bit more specific than this. for example, if you have a client page or a client support page, you probably don't want to track the clicks of email addresses and telephone numbers from that particular page, because that's not going to be new business. That's likely to be existing clients, and you're simply going to get false positives. So just be careful when you're setting these up. If you're new to all of this and feeling a little bit overwhelmed, don't worry about it. Just get the basics in there. Get tracking those kind of core revenue generating activities as events, and then we can turn them into conversions in Google Analytics. Again, unfortunately, I don't have time to go into the detail of the how you do that within Tag Manager, but please don't be phased by setting these up. It is fairly simple, and hopefully I've already demonstrated why it's absolutely worth it. Now, once you have created your events in Tag Manager, then they have to be triggered at least once before they will show up as events in Google Analytics. So you create the event in Tag Manager. Let's say every time someone clicks a telephone number, it registers as an event. Okay, so let's say you create that within Tag Manager. You then need to wait a period of time for that event to actually happen on your website before it will show in Google Analytics. Now, obviously, you can manually force that yourself. You can create the event in Tag Manager and then simply go onto your website and click telephone number, and that should trigger the event within Analytics. But just be aware that, especially within Google Analytics 4, these things are not instant. You might have to wait 24 hours before you'll actually see it. So just be aware of that. Don't worry that if you click on your telephone number, it doesn't show immediately within the events within Google Analytics. But once it is showing, you then need to mark it, or mark the relevant events as conversions. And this is really important because it will enable you to much more easily separate the revenue generating events from the default events which are created by Google Analytics. Now, this part is really, really simple. Within Google Analytics, you simply go to admin, then events, and you will see all of the events listed there. And there will be a column that says mark as a conversion. As I said, for the relevant conversions, you simply toggle that on. Very, very easy. But remember, it's very, very important that you only want to do this for the events that will lead to a genuine revenue generating opportunity for your business. Okay, so earlier we saw that my client's data included a source of traffic that was labeled as none or direct. And if you're familiar with analytics or used it before, you've probably seen this in your own data. What this is when Google Analytics has no data, it doesn't know how a user has arrived on your website. Now, this can be caused by a number of reasons. One second. So the most common reasons are when people literally type in a website URL and press into their address bar and press enter. Now, if you think about the way that you use the internet, it is highly unlikely that a large volume of people are using the internet in this way. So it is possible that if you're doing a lot of offline marketing, for example, you attend a lot of networking events, you put on events, or you go to events yourself, that you may get a high proportion of people doing this because you might be handing out business cards, etc. But over a sustained period of time, or if you're not doing that kind of marketing, it's unlikely. Another way that this might be triggered is if you have links to your website from other websites, so referral traffic, but the referring website has added a tag to the link called no referrer. Now, it's a little bit technical here. I don't want you to worry about what this is and how it works, but it's just important that you're aware that it exists. And some people do add the no referrer tag to the links, which just means that if I put a link on my website to one of your websites, and in the link I put no referrer, and somebody clicks on that link, they will appear on your website, and Google Analytics won't know where they've come from, because I've said don't send the data. I don't want them to know that they've come from me, basically. Again, it's quite unlikely you're going to get a high volume of this style traffic, but it could be as a result of a lot of link building. So if you've run an SEO campaign and you've done a lot of link building, you may have some no referrer link traffic in there. But again, it's unlikely to be high volume. All right. The third and the way in which I believe most of this is caused is email. So within email, if I was to send an email to any one of you now saying, click on this link to my website, and you clicked on it, you would end up on my website and Google Analytics would have no idea that you'd come from email. And that is because emails are secure environments. So if you do a lot of email marketing, or if you simply send out a lot of emails with links to your website, and I know this is quite common for people in recruitment. They might be sending out a lot of emails in relation to jobs. Go have a look at the job on my website, etc. You will not see that traffic in Google Analytics. It would all be dumped into the direct or none source. And this is not very helpful because we can't measure the performance of our email marketing like we can other sources. And this is why we must use UTM tracking codes in every link you put in all of your email. Now, don't worry, this is really, really easy. So if you head to utmbuilder.com, it's a completely free website. It pretty much looks like what I put on the slide here. You can use it to create UTM tracking codes which go on the end of the links. Now, again, don't worry, it's not massively technical. It might sound it, but I'll talk you through it. So when you see the form like this, you need to fill in the first few fields. First of all, in the URL field, you need to enter the link or the URL that you want to add into your email. So in this example, I want to send an email out and I want to send someone a link to my website, the homepage. So you put that in the URL field. In the source field, I suggest you enter the word newsletter, all lowercase, no spaces, nothing like that. Just keep it really simple. And I suggest you use that for marketing emails. So if you're sending out a marketing campaign, then use the word newsletter. If it's a generic email, you could be a little bit more specific and you could potentially put sales or marketing or client or something like that. But it's important that whatever you put here, you have a consistent naming style and strategy, because otherwise you'll end up with a massive load of data within Analytics and ultimately Look Studio, and you don't want that. So if you send out lots of similar emails, make sure that the word that you put in the source field is the same. Medium is much more straightforward. This should just simply always be email, all lowercase, one word, no hyphens, exactly as I put it on the screen. And then finally, campaign, you could be a bit more specific here. So again, I've created this as an example. If I were to send out a campaign promoting this webinar we're on right now, this is exactly how I would use UTM Builder. And I would put in the campaign name, I would put the name of the content that this is about. So it's about the analytics webinar that is on today's date. If you use something like MailChimp or any other email marketing platform, you're likely to have campaign names within their program. So you can literally copy and paste it. That way the two match up and you can measure the performance of those campaigns. Term and content, you completely ignore, don't worry about those. And then finally, you simply press the build URL button. That will automatically populate the generated URL field that's at the bottom. And then you simply copy that and paste it into your emails instead of where you would have put the original email. It's all really easy. Once you've done it a few times, you'll be doing it in seconds. The keen-eyed of you will notice that the generated URL is quite simply the original base URL with some code added to the end. Done correctly, this will display a new row in your data source, your traffic source data, sorry, that shows traffic from people who click the links in the emails that you sent. All right. That was a fairly swift overview of some of the basic ways you can better maximize Google Analytics for your business. I did cover quite a lot, so I would absolutely welcome any feedback if it was too much, too little, too fast, too technical, not enough, etc. Absolutely let us know. More importantly, I'd really welcome any feedback on anything you'd like us to cover in future webinars. We'll absolutely be doing plenty more of these. So if there's anything like particularly you'd like us to know or would want us to cover in the future, then definitely do let us know. Ultimately, though, I really hope you found some value in the session. We have recorded it. We will send the recording out. And I think, Heather, we have some time for questions.